Hello and welcome to the weekly voice chat of the Men's Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official Discord server of the Men's Rights subreddit. And Happy New Year, Happy 2023. This is the first talk of the new year, and we are going to be reviewing 2022. A lot to talk about in 2022, like every year in men's rights. News stories, controversies, in my opinion, the big story for the men's rights movement of 2022 was Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. And I know that the case itself happened before 2022, but this was the year I think that was the biggest turning point I've seen thus far with believing not only male victims of domestic violence, but men falsely accused of domestic violence. In that way, this year was a watershed year. And it's encouraging that at least we're beginning to see things change. Something that I've noticed that's very different on the Ask Men subreddit is just how unpopular feminist narratives are. People talking about misandry, people talking about quote crazy feminism. I saw today getting 80 upvotes, which would have been unheard of 6 years ago. So things are definitely shifting, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2023. Now, I want to make an announcement and a recommendation. Mr. Mike Painter has just posted his recent video from his Two Bloke series, which I gotta say really is fantastic. Unfortunately, it's fantastic in the sense that it's very well done and very informative. It's actually quite depressing to watch because they dig right into the core of men's issues and news stories regarding men's rights, and it ain't pretty, I gotta tell you. The one that they just posted was a panel of women bullying a young man on a television show. I watched it. It's awful to watch. It's painful to watch, but it's necessary to watch. It's necessary to talk about these kinds of stories. So it's kind of an open floor. Please talk. We want people other than mods to talk from time to time, which I don't see people other than staff even here. So, there you go. But share your thoughts about stories that have happened, maybe stories that happened in your country or your town that didn't make world news or didn't make national news, and maybe your predictions for next year. So that is what we are talking about today.
Right, I'm going to go quickly. Obviously, we've got the podcast in the Saturday text chat there. It's called the Two Blokes Podcast. If anyone wants to come and have a listen, then please do so. Comment and all that good stuff. Also, a few weeks ago, we did a chat about dangerous jobs and all that sort of stuff. And the following week, I had an unfortunate update from my workplace regarding one of my colleagues who was very, very badly injured with an accident. I'm happy to report that he's now home, although he's got a very long recovery from his injuries. He's been given an initial leave of absence from employment of 3 months. But he's going to be having various operations on his face. But as I say, luckily, he's now at home, which is a good thing. I saw him during the week. Although he looks very, very rough, and he's obviously very, very poorly, he's at least alive, which is a good thing considering what he's been through. So, for a second, that's sort of the update that I've got. If anyone else wants to mention anything.
My personal thought is that 2022 had two major wins in it. That we've already gone over one, the Amber Heard Johnny Depp thing, but the other one was Twitter, and I think this is actually major. I think this is really major if Twitter can stay afloat. This is now a platform, a major platform that everyone's on, which no longer has the kind of horrifying dystopian censorship that feminists love to push on everything. Like, those people have been purged from the company. And as long as they can be kept out as much as possible, and also the government interference as well, the legal government interference, I might add, as long as that can be kept out, we suddenly have a platform, a massive platform where we can talk freely. And the great thing about that is that when we can talk freely, we win. The only way feminism is able to keep control of places like Reddit and Tumblr and Facebook and other places like that is because they have moderators who suppress anyone who gets in their way. And that is literally the only reason. Now that we are free to talk to everyone on Twitter, it's going to be absolutely incredible. I think we have just taken a very massive positive step as a society away from tyranny, which really is my good news for 2022. That's the thing that I'm particularly happy about. The Johnny Depp thing is actually second to that, because although the Johnny Depp thing is massive, this is actually, I think, even bigger. And I don't think people are going to realize how big until they see that the Johnny Depp stuff is no longer suppressed, and Team Amber on Twitter is actually in retreat, I think, because of this. So that is how big this is. It's not just us being free, it's the narrative going off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through Twitter at the moment because there was a tweet I wanted to grab. Fortunately, I think my timeline's gone a bit too far on. But there are all sorts of tweets and what have you, including one that you put out, Mar, which was the girl on the podcast saying that she enjoyed hurting men and what have you. People are talking about that, which is something I saw on TikTok a while ago. But yeah, I think Twitter's gotten a little bit better since obviously Elon Musk took it over, but I think it's going to go backwards if I'm brutally honest. And I think the backlash is going to be absolutely vicious. We've started to see it on sites like TikTok where men's or male positive content creators are starting to be attacked, and you know, the funny hair color brigade are getting louder and louder and more vocal, and they are being able to say that they're going to go after sort of men's rights activists and what have you. So yeah, we'll wait and see.
I do think that people like that become louder and more obnoxious when they know they're losing. They know that everyone is sick of them. They know that nobody took them seriously in the first place, except that they had enough power that they could suppress people. And I think that this is actually part of, it doesn't feel like a win, but them getting louder and more obnoxious actually is a win if more people see them and realize what they're actually like.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I'm kind of against reporting, like, to a degree, reporting really obnoxious, nasty things people say on Twitter and online generally. Instead, I like amplifying them so that people can see what they're actually like. And you'd be amazed how many people have made their accounts private or deleted their tweets because of people doing stuff like that. Like it's just mind-boggling. Peer pressure is a pretty major weapon. They use it all the time. We need to use it as well, and not just peer pressure, but amplification, showing people that just what they're saying and what they're doing and where things are going.
Yeah. Well, one little positive thing I have got off of Twitter is a story that actually came out by way of a male-orientated domestic violence researcher, and it's from the Times and Sunday Times of Scotland's Twitter feed. Scotland's sexist and biased domestic abuse services are to be overhauled amid complaints that men are unfairly stigmatised as violent perpetrators and dismissed when they are victims. Now, obviously, this is something we know has been going on for decades.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that
Yes, you protested against that.
well, the fact that the Scottish should now sort of, well, any country really, are turning around and saying, yeah, maybe we need to have another look at this, is positive. We can't deny that. It is a good thing.
Good,
So,
especially that it will force feminists to really kind of play their hands and really kind of reveal themselves, because either they do nothing, which they're incapable of doing, they support it and they're forced to admit that it's valid, or most likely they find some completely irrational, stupid way to protest it and claim that it's wrong, and start really digging themselves into increasingly more and more indefensible positions. So I think we should turn on the heat a little bit. I used to be more, let's try and extend the olive branch with feminists, and I still think that we should keep that option open. But let's go after the groups that do and say these terrible things. Let's show people that these groups do and say terrible things. I think with the shift after the Amber Heard reaction, we have an opening now that we didn't have before.
Yeah, the worst thing we can do is get complacent. We need to be pushing and making sure that they are revealed, they are on display, and they are essentially uncovered before the world. This is one of the actual good things that came out of COVID, was that it put teachers in people's living rooms, and the parents got to overhear some of the insane SJW stuff that they're being taught. And so now there's a massive blowback on that. I do think that that has possibly decreased as students have gone back to school, but I'm hoping that it continues and that people keep revealing what's going on in schools, because people forget that even if we win now and we push back the feminists and so on, the next generation is coming, and the next generation was taught by this generation of feminists to be even more crazy. And if we can't stamp down on that now, we're absolutely screwed in like 10 years. They'll be back, they'll be worse than ever, they'll be gibbering insane, and there'll be more of them.
yeah, it's highly likely. The other thing, bit of positive news, is the way in which false allegations are now being treated. There have been 2 cases, both up in the north, either side of the country. One was false allegations of gang rape, which was proven false, and the woman's just awaiting sentencing. and another was false allegations of domestic abuse, which led to insane levels of police police action being taken, and the woman at the centre of that is now languishing in prison. My only caveat to that is these women are being charged and convicted of perjury, which is essentially lying to the court. And so it's not, when they come out of prison and all of the media scrum has died down, unless anyone bothers to actually dig into what happened with them, they're just going to say that they lied to the court about something, and that will be the end of it. You know, I think the next step with that one is going to have to be pushing to have making a false allegation actually recorded as making a false allegation. So that's what I'm hoping to see in the future as well.
It's good
So-
to hear that.
If I can just ask really fast, does that mean that as of now, false accusations, even when they're proven false, are not recorded?
Not as a false allegation, no. It's recorded as perjury, which, as I say, is basically lying to the court. And you can commit perjury in almost any court case, essentially. And, you know, things like family courts, that will need to be dealt with, because that's just getting insane again. But there needs to be a proper statute on the books for the recording of a false allegation.
Yeah, it's good that things are sort of seem to be progressing a little bit, but it is worth remembering that most false allegations are ignored by the police, who will tell you straight up to your face they're not going to investigate it. Those ones that are investigated are generally classed as perjury or wasting police time. And lastly, if they aren't put into the statistics as a false allegation of rape, they're put into statistics as perjury. So this is how the game is played, basically. It's they don't jot it down, and therefore we are forced to rely on the most scanty of stats, and the scanty stats are the most minimized stats possible, and those are the ones that feminists love, because like, oh, only, you know, microscopic number are false, and of course they never really have a source for that, so they generally just say it, and they'll point you to studies, usually RAIN studies, which are basically just CDC, or like CDC studies, like redone with fancy graphics. But what they'll show you is a vast number of people who got away with it, but you have to realize a huge chunk of those are false accusers who were caught as false accusers and then released, essentially. So a lot of those stats aren't actually, like, a lot of those stats are actually in our favor rather than theirs, but they'll try and trick you and say, look how many people got away with it. But it's like, hold on, those people are people who the police were like, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a crime here, or there doesn't seem to be enough evidence. So a lot of those are malicious accusations. Also, a lot of them are accidents and other stuff, but a huge chunk are malicious accusations. They're just not recorded as such.
I don't know if anyone wants to read off the link that I've just posted.
Would you like to read it?
I can open my big screen.
Oh, your big
easier.
fancy screen, eh? I've been seeing a lot of stuff about false accusations recently. I think they're becoming like more common in the press, like to report them, which is quite interesting because the press is usually against that.
Mike, is it the Borough woman convicted of making false accusations, or the Twitter link?
No, it's the one from Barrow in Furness, mate. The CPS link.
Okay. So I'm actually going to do a screenshot so we can see it and everybody can read along. Borough woman convicted of making... Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
Sorry. Borough women convicted of making false rape allegations. A young woman has been found guilty of perverting the course of justice after maliciously making false allegations of sexual abuse, violence, and rape against men. It is important to say from the outset that it is very rare that we prosecute someone for making false allegations. Wow, they actually said it. And this is .gov. This is the government saying it is important to say from the outset that it is very rare we prosecute someone for making false allegations. Are they bragging? Are they saying that it's a difficult case? Okay, I think the next sentence answers that. Malicious allegations such as these are extremely rare, and multiple allegations against several men rarer still. Well, that's a pretty scary thing to read. Malicious allegations such as these are extremely rare, which is false, and multiple allegations. Like, the fact that they feel the need to say that, to me, is jarring, but I'm going to carry on. Victims of rape or sexual assault should never fear coming forward to report the crime to police, which has nothing to do with false accusations. Eleanor Williams, 22, of Borough-in-Furness, was found guilty by a jury of 7 offenses at Preston Crown Court today after an 11-week trial. She admitted another offense of intending to pervert the course of justice at an earlier hearing. She will be sentenced on 14th of March, 2023. I don't feel good about that at all. She fabricated evidence to support her claims, including fake Snapchat accounts and messages that implicated a number of men who she knew, and gave the police fictitious names of people who she said had subjected her to sexual violence, abuse, and rape, which to me seems like the real victim here is the court. And what they're angry about is not the fact that she accused men of rape, but the fact that she wasted the court's time. The way this is framed is like the court is the victim here. They don't even mention, I mean, what's so disgusting is they don't even talk about the victims of the crime. They have a whole paragraph to say how rare this crime is, how these things are very rare, and victims should never come forward. But they don't have a single. This should. I'm gonna make a video of this, and this could almost be a debate topic in and of itself. They have.
You notice that little thing he did there. They're not recorded, but they're super rare. You see?
Right.
So nobody knows how many there are because they're not recorded, but they're super rare because they're not recorded.
It's unbelievable. So then there's another one. Oh no, sorry, it's the same article. Wendy Lloyd, senior Crown prosecutor with Crown Prosecution Service Northwest Rape and Serious Sexual Offense Unit, said Eleanor Williams maliciously and persistently made false accusations against several men who had the misfortune of being acquainted with her. She knew what she was doing each time, made these false allegations, intending that these men would be investigated, potentially prosecuted, or even imprisoned as a result of her actions. One man was in prison on remand for over 2 months as a result of her accusations. Okay, at least they do say something. The impact of those falsely accused has been devastating, and this conviction now fully exonerates the men who she accused of serious sexual abuse. The police and CPS take allegations of sexual offending extremely seriously. Each of Eleanor Williams' accusations were thoroughly investigated until it became clear that they were completely and incontrovertibly untrue and made with malevolent intent. I'm not sure how much I believe they take accusations of sexual offending extremely seriously, because if they did, then they would take false accusations like this extremely seriously, which they clearly don't, because as I said in the beginning, it is important to say from the outset that it is very rare that we prosecute someone for making false allegations. So how seriously do you really take it?
It's interesting, there was a charity recently in the BBC, no less, saying that quite often female abusers will threaten to make false allegations in order to control their victims. And the feminists went nuts about that, saying, oh, false allegations are rare, false allegations are rare. Of course, ignoring the fact that it was a threat, not an actual allegation to start with. So it just proves that they don't read this stuff really. They just knee-jerk react. They see the keyword false allegations and it presses their red button, and they go off on their little rant. And of course, it's especially difficult to get them out of those. But yeah, it was really good to see in the BBC that they were actually saying that abusers will use against people, because everybody knows this. Everybody really knows this, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Of course, the biggest place for false allegations to be made is in family court. It's what's known as a silver bullet. And
yeah, we have stats on that, thankfully. Twice as many fake allegations as real ones. And by fake, I mean malicious. But we should move on to other topics, because this is 2022 in retrospective. So other big news stories of 2022. What have you got?
I think from the men's rights point of view, 2022 was just dominated by Johnny Depp. I can't think of many more than that. I suppose was the whole Harvey Weinstein.
I might say Andrew Tate, and people might say, well, what does Andrew Tate have to do with the men's rights movement? And that's kind of the point. The fact that all the articles that I read about Andrew Tate did not mention, well, some obviously did. And of course, every feminist blog did, but that's to be expected because that's what they do. But the mainstream media sources, the vast majority of the ones that I saw, did not use the term men's rights activist, or MRA, in the article about Andrew Tate. They used manosphere, or they used red pill, or they used brosphere is the new term that they made up, which is not really a thing. But for the most part, men's rights activist was left out of the conversation.
I'm glad to hear that, because he's more of a PUA than anything else. And definitely using steroids, by the way. But that's a side issue. It's own business, really. Yeah, but Andrew Tate, I only heard about him last year. And it's like suddenly feminists are saying, yeah, he's like the biggest thing in the men's rights movement. Just like, no, he's not. If we haven't heard of him, he's not a big deal in our movement.
I've actually recently commented that I think he's more of a tradcon and a bit of a simp, to be fair. But yeah, whatever.
Probably, I don't really care. I think the only reason they can even slightly justify this stuff is he said something anti-feminist once, and that was enough. Suddenly he's. But yeah, this is the way they define people. Manosphere is a non-existent thing.
Yeah,
it's purely constructed by journalists.
Of course, his silly thing was to get involved in a childish spat with Greta Thunberg, who I just want to point out, by the way. No, it wasn't really fun. It was funny for the fact that it was childish. I want to point out there was an awful lot of commentary in the immediate aftermath that Greta had done this wonderful thing with what she'd said and everything else. All she'd done is resort to a child's playground school insult, nothing more. And if the only weapon she's got in her arsenal is to make some kind of body shaming comment, then she hasn't really got a lot. And the whole thing was a bit of a storm in a teacup. And I'm gonna say,
I think the problem is that so many people were so foolish on social media that they genuinely thought her saying that to him was what somehow guided the police to his house, to where he was arrested.
Yeah. And
people were like, she's a great hero. He's been arrested. She exposed where he was. It's like, she didn't expose anything. They already knew. This was a planned thing.
Yeah. The press don't end up where he's being arrested without prior knowledge that it's going to go ahead at the end of the day. You know, I don't buy this nonsense of the pizza order or whatever it was the reason that he was arrested. It's a load of old tripe. It was pre-planned. You know, I will say that if the evidence is incontrovertible that he's done the things he's been accused of, then let him rot, as far as I'm concerned. If he is innocent, then he should be defended with all the, you know, the strength that the law allows. Don't like the man, haven't got a lot of time for him, but yeah, everyone has the right to a fair trial and what have you, innocent until proven guilty.
And if he's guilty and he goes to jail, hallelujah.
Yeah,
if he goes, but you know, really, like I say, making any more out of it than, you know, a pretty sketchy character operating, you know, as close to the edge of the law as he thought he could getting the wrong kind of attention from the Romanian government means that at some point, you know, they're gonna act on it. His, you know, kind of pseudo celebrity probably has little to do with it in their eyes. It's just like, you know, this is a criminal and we're gonna go get him. You know, I mean, the only thing I suppose that we could make of it is, you know, to point to his situation and say, you know, it's becoming clearer every day that people like that have nothing to do with people like us, and they never did, and they never will. You know, and thankfully, it's finally coming to the point where, you know, the mainstream is starting to lay off of that. You know, but it's like that. In terms of men's issues, Andrew Tate is kind of a nothing burger. It doesn't really matter, you know, what happens to him.
They just want an enemy.
Yeah, and
if
it turns out that he can't be successfully prosecuted, then, you know, everyone's just going to say, well, he bought his way out of it. You know, Romanian jurisprudence and government officials are corruptible, which, you know, as far as I know, that's true. I couldn't say. I've never been there. But, you know, again, it's what's happening with him in the media is, like I said, if anything, it's a little bit of good news about, you know, our association with anyone like that, which is that we don't have one. So,
well, the great thing about Tate is that when people say he's like an MRA and stuff, that's a way for us to leap into the conversation and say, no, this is what an MRA is, and start listing our talking points. And that is good for us. I mean, I don't personally care about him at all. Like, as far as I'm concerned, they just want another enemy who's like, you know, they can dangle in front of people's faces.
Well, I would have to say, I don't think we have talking points. We have facts and issues. Talking point, to me, when I hear that term, I think of, you know, lie or you know, propaganda. So I don't use the phrase
I think circumcision, but, you know, like topics, basically. Okay, go over our topics then, if you prefer that term. Like our statistics, our studies, and so on and so forth. And like, just take people through them. Like it's a really good way to keep off of things. And I urge people to, even if we don't like the feminists, to try and be as polite as possible while destroying them, because honestly, you will come across people who come across as absolute mindless feminists and you'll show them a few stats and things, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And they'll be like, okay, I kind of agree with you guys now. And you'll find out that the reason they're being nasty to you is because they don't respect you, because they thought you believed something completely different to what you actually thought. And that's most of them, I think. Is mostly they don't understand us. They don't know what we think. They think I think a lot of them actually genuinely do think we're incels, and that we're like arguing for incel rights or something, which is just nonsense.
I also really want to see this weekly chat, grow in 2023. I really want to see the channel start to grow and start to actually collect an audience. So we need to break out of these kind of insular talks. I mean, we're the semi-official, whatever that means, Discord server of the subreddit, yet we have virtually no contact with the subreddit. Almost no awareness of what they're doing, and they have almost no awareness of what we're doing. And that's obviously not going to help. But we need to start having events. We need to start having guests. We need to start having debates. We need to start having things that have a chance to go viral, or at least get some attention and start bringing in an audience. So since we're doing a 2022 in review, let's maybe do a 2023 preview and brainstorming.
Yeah, well, we do have contacts with the sub, and I think that we should. It's more of a case we really need to start using them, and they need to start using their contacts with us. What we need here is like a back and forth. I hate to use the word synergy, but that's basically what I'm going for here. We really need to start talking with the sub a lot more, and get people going back and forth. Silence and ignorance are where rumors are born, basically, and where like malcontents arise and so on and so forth. So it's best to keep everything as open and truthful as possible, so that we can just keep this free flow of information. After all, choking information is how feminists work, and that's how their lies are propagated. But we really do need more back and forth. If anyone has any other ideas on what we can do, let's go with them, and let's have them out here.
Well, I don't know how Taz feels about this, but maybe we could promote the server through our podcast.
Sure. I think it's a fine idea. I get a lot out of the time that I spend here, so I don't see why not. Speaking about the subreddit itself, especially in recent years, because I've been sub to it for a really long time. And, I've also kind of on and off been subbed to the Men's Lib subreddit. And I noticed that they both kind of have this struggle where, they run so hit and miss between really making sense and, being thoughtful. And then other times, they both kind of just really go off the rails. And I never figured out why until I realized that a lot of the content in both of those subreddits that, really looks off to me, it's coming from people, that are in a lot of pain. Ma, as you said, live in a lot of silence and a lot of ignorance, and when they speak up, they just kind of babble. They don't really think about what they're saying. They just say stuff, you know. And one is on one side of it and the other's on the other side of it. And, the places like this, and hopefully, the channel that Mike and I have created are going to be an antidote for that. But Blue, you mentioned growing this channel and getting more interaction and more content from other people. The only obstacle there is who it's not that we aren't inviting people to be here. It's that the kind of people I'm thinking of actually they're still a little afraid of us. I mean, they're afraid of association with us, and maybe for good reason. Maybe, well, not good reason, but understandably. I mean, most people I know who have a good head on their shoulders have been lied to about just men and boys in general, and men and boys that are trying to remedy that their whole life, right? I mean, this isn't something that just popped up since COVID. It's just always been in the water, and I think the like thoughtful thing to do is make sure that we hear more often from even-handed, thoughtful people than anywhere else. Because the one thing I've noticed is there's no scarcity of really bad takes from our side just as much as any other. And like I said, it's like I see a lot of it, but I'm like, well, so what? Not helping. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think we have skipped over a little bit the Ukraine war, where Russia is even now sending in another 500,000 war slaves. I mean, let's not call them soldiers. Teenage war slaves, where they're sending in these boys to die, and Ukraine is conscripting their own war slaves, and the real losers here are men. Let's be honest. If we see like some numbers equivalent to the Great War, the First Great War, in terms of deaths, I wouldn't be surprised. Like things there are just...
It's going to be very bloody and protracted, and at least from the side of the Russian Republic, it's mostly going to be populated by, as you say, conscripts. I mean, abductees, right? Press gangs, very well armed and poorly trained, and large numbers of children pressed into combat. That's what's been happening. That's what's gonna happen. I don't, I don't see like a short end to that war. And if by some miracle, it I don't know, stops, being a hot war in the short term, it'll pick back up again shortly. If it doesn't continue on, uninterrupted, then the interruptions are going to be short. And that really sucks. In fact, that might be the worst of the two, because
the war isn't going to end until there's a change in the power structure, person in
Well,
charge.
The best thing we can hope for is that whoever gets to be Putin's replacement in Russia is far more moderate. But my suspicion is that whoever replaces Putin in Russia is going to be 10 times worse, if that's possible. Because they will not want to have a long protracted war on their copybook. The Russians haven't got the firepower and everything else that we think they have.
Whoever takes over Putin's position, they will probably reopen negotiations to try and end this peacefully.
That's if they're
It's
moderate.
obvious at this point that Putin has zero intentions of negotiations.
No, he doesn't. Not at all.
I think I am cautiously optimistic in that I think that the Russian people are becoming increasingly fed up with their crazy leadership. And I think that they may demand change in a big way. We've actually seen pro-Ukrainian protests in Russia, which is a really big thing. So it's hard to say how much. It's hard to say how much, like a small thing's being magnified by the media, who are very much pro-Ukraine. But I'm going to lean on the side of hope, because despair is poisonous in any case. But there is always a chance that a strongman leader is going to be replaced by an even stronger man leader, because in that kind of political scenario, showing weakness is death.
Yeah.
But on the same front, Putin has been roundly killing off most of his allies. From what I've heard, everyone seems to be suddenly suffering from falling down the stairs sickness, in other words. So I do think that style of politics may become unpopular in Russia, though it's very hard to say.
Yeah. Well, I'm just old enough to remember Mikhail Gorbachev. I'm certainly old enough to remember Boris Yeltsin. And unless there's one of those waiting in the wings, I can only see the situation in Russian politics getting worse, not better. Sorry, Pokemon Talk, to disagree with you, but I can't see this getting any better. And as for what's going on in the Ukraine, I can almost see it going like Israel and Palestine, to be honest with you, whereby there's this kind of uneasy peace which is interrupted by the occasional, piece of military action, which maybe takes place over a couple of days, and then it's sort of over and done with for a few years, and then it happens again. That
sounds like a very frustrating situation.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole Palestine-Israel thing is a very frustrating situation. There's not actual peace there, but it's sort of peace for a few years, and then there'll be a rocket attack from somebody into somebody else's space, and then it'll go peaceful again. It'll happen again a few years later.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, and that's not even something that would require, Putin stepping down. At this time, it really doesn't look like he's interested in peace at all. But, if he gets enough of what he wants, then, he may become more willing to negotiate. But if he gets everything he wants, then it will be like Israel and Palestine. It'll be an occupation, right? And, Ukrainians are like most people. They don't like being occupied. They didn't like it during the USSR days, and they don't like it now. So I would say, for men in general in that part of the world, there's no easy answers, and it probably won't be. it probably won't be over with, very quickly or very completely. It's just always going to, I mean, Ukraine has always been a bone of contention, like forever. And, I don't, in other words, I look for an incentive, for just the Russian government to back down, and I really can't find one. They have some minor, maybe, I don't know what you would call it, politically expedient reasons to cease fire for a time, but only after they get, a lot of what they're in there looking for anyway.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's the unacceptable part. That's the part that is going to keep the ball rolling, even if Putin declares victory. It ain't going to be over, man.
Well, obviously the economic sanctions haven't worked. They haven't done the thing that the West was hoping they'd do.
No.
And I think barring Western military action, we're not going to see an end to the conflict in the Ukraine.
No.
Not for a long time. And part of me thinks the West wouldn't have much problems in dealing with Russia from what we've seen. The only question mark to that is how crazy is Putin? Is he crazy? How is he crazy enough where he would push the big red button? Personally, I don't think so. But then how crazy are Russian supporters and Russian allies, i.e. China and Iran? Are they crazy enough to push the big red button? Well, they're a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
I personally think Putin is a little bit, all mouth and no trousers when it comes to the West. China and Iran, I'm not quite so sure on.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what gives him the courage to stand his ground, is that he can hide behind their skirts a little bit.
I think Putin may know better than to press the red button. He's obviously been holding back. But I think a greater question might be how long this war may last, in terms of how much longer are people willing to take what's going on, the citizens of both Ukraine and Russia, before they try to. I'm doing that right now, Mom. Give it a second. Before they really turn back, because we're reading this. One of the biggest issues is Russia's been relentlessly sending conscripts that we know are male only.
Yeah.
And there's only so many men that you can send, whether you like it or not. No matter how much men you think are disposable, they're gonna run out at some point.
Have you ever
And first of all,
seen?
they shouldn't have in the first place.
No.
In my opinion, only be sending men. Ukraine's the same problem. Ukraine's such a small country, and their fighting force is strong because they're very prideful and they want to keep their country. But I think one of the things Ukraine failed in is they immediately said, "Okay, we're not letting men pass the border, and we're forcing them to stay and fight all the men in this country." They're so small; they really needed. I mean, yes, so far they're succeeding to a good amount, but they really need everybody. And
Yeah.
the worst part is they're pissing off their men, because then all their little news reports are about, "Oh, look at the hospital run by women who decide to stay behind."
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen? There's a video on YouTube detailing the casualties from World War II.
Mhm.
The list of Russian casualties is absolutely terrifying.
It's massive.
Yeah, it absolutely dwarfs anything we saw in the West. The Russian casualties were in the tens of millions. And I think that the Russians have absolutely no problem with sending their men to die.
But
The
the thing
question,
is, how much longer are the men going to be willing to take it? And or sadly, how many more are they going to be able to send? Because I could be wrong about this. Someone search it up. But I think Russia's lost so much of its population in the last decade or so.
I think, to be honest with you, it's going to, when they start having to conscript women, if we're going to go into the realms of, country goes to war, women most affected. But if they have to start conscripting women, that's when I think the will of the people will be broken. And that's when I think the Russian people will start trying to force the government into a ceasefire, potentially, or a withdrawal from the Ukraine, potentially. But
Or is
I
it going
could
to
be
be the
wrong.
fight of which country has to conscript their women first?
Yeah. I think that's
Well,
where it's gonna get
Ukraine
to.
has already ejected most of theirs, so it's there are women left there, and a fair few are fighting. Not as many as the Western media wants you to think. A lot of them are in support roles, though, a la World War II. But I don't think that there's enough that they could really conscript people. I mean, it's hard to really say, but they got rid of so many that, like, at this point, they've probably sent most of the strong, healthy ones away.
Yeah, and you're right, Katrina. Russia's population has been steadily declining because people are moving out for obvious reasons, and that's been happening for a while.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I know there's like a big thing where Russia's not the most accepting of LGBTQ community, and so for the last at least like 20, 30 years, the LGBTQ community itself was just trying to get out of there. And most people are leaving because of the economic crisis in Russia.
A lot of smart inventors and computer tech people left Russia to come to the United States. One example is Sergey Brin, who invented Google. They leave Russia because there's no opportunity to do things there.
I think that was more to do with the lack of money, as it were, in the country more than opportunity.
Well, that's kind of the same thing.
But,
Sort of both, to be
well,
honest.
the opportunities to do the work are still there. They're just not being paid for it. That's the difference.
Let's just take a moment to be glad that we've only got the SJWs controlling Google instead of the Soviets.
Well,
that would have been a no.
Well, they work on the same basic principles, don't they?
Pretty much. But at least these ones are soft and floppy and easily squished, if you get them on their own.
Yeah.
It's better than, But anyway, I think that we've gone off track enough and we've gone through enough that I think it's time to maybe think about winding this down.
Can we just let Taz detail what he just posted quickly?
Sure.
Matt Walsh's response to Andrew Tate.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, just really quick. I just posted today, and it's another one of those, really more conservative perspectives than, anything really supporting men. Basically, what it boiled down to was that Andrew Tate was and is someone, who's doing it wrong because he's so hedonistic and self-absorbed and self-centered, and et cetera, but that, the real and legitimate path for any true man is a life of service as protector and provider for, a wife and children. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that's a really strong and difficult to contend with impulse and imperative among at least straight men. They want to get married, and many of them want to get married and want to have a family. And he did finally break down and mention the fact that one of the obstacles standing in the way of all of that is not only the culture, but also, at least in the West, the legal system. What he doesn't do, and what conservatives are really notorious for ignoring, is what to do about that. He basically wound it up by saying, that it is a risk, but it's a risk that's worth it. And I thought to myself, well, it's a risk that's worth it if nothing bad happens, and if you can kind of, remain close to perfect from one end of your adult life to the other. But, I guess just in sheer numbers, most men can't do that under those conditions. Under the best conditions, being that kind of man is a tricky proposition. And I was having a conversation with a woman not long ago about that. And I said, let's turn it around for a second, and forget about my aversion to risk or anything like that. Basically, this proposal is saying it's a risk for me, yes, but the hypothetical partner that I would choose, this woman, gets to spend a lifetime proving to me that she's not that kind of woman. That's kind of a lousy deal for her too. Because all of the pressure, community, culture, country, is pushing against her, and telling her that, not only can she be that kind of woman, she ought to be. And I'm like, what a lousy deal for her. That sounds. If I was in that situation, I would also say no. I'm not going to spend my life proving myself to a partner. It's crazy. But anyway, that was what I thought about it. I don't know. Did anybody else see it?
I didn't personally, no.
I haven't seen it.
Thing is,
Let's see if I can post it.
The likes of Matt Walsh and what have you, they're a bit of a broken watch in that they're right twice a day.
Yeah.
When it comes to men and boys.
Yeah, most often, he's saying the right thing with kind of a ham-fisted delivery. But in this case, honestly, I think, and this time he wasn't being ham-fisted. He was being very sincere, and earnest. It's just like I said, I think he, like most people, really fears addressing that part of it. The conservatives put themselves in a position where, they support law and order and all of that, to the point where, when it affects a group that they're trying to support, they kind of have to pick one. It's either men in general, or that strong support for law and order, and traditionalism. Ma, you put in the chat, he also supports things like circumcision, etc. In other words, the bind that they keep putting themselves in is that when their core beliefs and ideology runs, afoul of something that frankly is a real problem, that, like I say, they just kind of stubbornly hold on to what they believe. And like I said, I mean, that's another reason why, I don't align myself with conservatism. It's not all, I have to make my choices too,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. American conservatives are a strange old bunch.
Yeah.
One minute they get something right, and the next minute they get it hopelessly wrong. Oh God, it's just the American political system anyway. But right,
Anyway, I think we should take this out. Some good free talk time.
All right.
Okay, so this has been the weekly Saturday chat of the Men Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official Discord server of the Men Human Rights subreddit. We are here every Saturday at 7:30 UK time, which is 1:30 Central or 2:30 Eastern. We always love hearing what you guys have to say, seeing you guys at this chat. We hope to see you guys more often. If you ever have a topic you want to recommend, we're open ears. You can always message Men Are Human, M Painter, Blue, or myself. But until then, see you all next week.